Planning Commission of July 27th. If you'd please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Villalobos, would you like to announce the TV coverage and make the roll call, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Montecito Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV, Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Orcutt areas. Rebroadcasts of Montecito Planning Commission hearings are on Friday at 5 p.m. on CSB TV, Channel 20. Now for the roll call, Commissioner Gottstinker. Here. Commissioner Burrows. Here. Commissioner Idelson. Here. And Commissioner Overall.
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Phillips is absent.
Next, if the Secretary would give us a status report and the projection report.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. This morning we have 4 items on your agenda, and we are ready to move forward with all 4 items, the first being a briefing. On the projection report, we are planning to conduct a hearing on August 24th. You can see there's a number of items on that day. Of note is the medical marijuana dispensary briefing we'll be providing to your commission, and the general package ordinance amendments. Now, that general package came to your commission several months ago and has been with the County Planning Commission for some time to work on both the outdoor storage of materials and parking of cars, as well as special events tied to short-term rentals. And the County Planning Commission has made some changes. We anticipate that they will be finalizing those next week, and so we want to bring those back to your commission for consideration as well. I think they're actually an improvement to those 2 sections of the ordinance, and if your commission agrees, then we'd prefer that they are consistent in Montecito and the rest of the county. So we'll be bringing those back, and I just wanted to explain that. I don't think it's going to be a real difficult package to absorb, and we certainly won't go through all the other items that were previously presented to your commission.
A quick question on that, Ms. Black.
Yes.
Any chance we can get that early in deference to, once it's finalized, because of in deference to vacation schedules and whatnot?
We can at least get you a copy of what we've provided to the County Planning Commission. Right. Since your commission's hearing, and then we may not have it all packaged up in your language yet, but we can get you that so you can look at it and have a sense of where those amendments are going, if that makes sense.
I think that'll help. It'll make for interesting reading.
Great. And then you'll notice that there's nothing projected out for your commission in September. I'm going to try really hard to give you a break in September. I'm not going to guarantee it, and we'll talk about it in August, but we've been having some fairly short hearings, and so I'd like to go ahead and see if we can consolidate and maybe leave September open. So we'll see how that goes. And that's all I had to report from that.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the opportunity for public comment. That's the time period reserved for somebody to address anything that is not on our agenda. I have no speaker slips, but is there someone who would like to make a comment? I see no indication, so I'm going to close public comment. And I'll turn next to my fellow commissioners for any informational reports you might have and want to share with the other commissioners. Let's see, do I have anything? I think not. Okay. Next item are the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Do we have any corrections from either Ms. Gottstinker or Mr. Idelson? No. Then why don't one of you make a motion for approval? And
I'll second.
I think we're all in favor. It should be noted that Ms. Burrows abstains. From the first item. Well, that's right. That's right. You were for the second item. Any corrections to your part of it?
No.
All right. I do not see Mr. Russell. Ms. Black, do you have a report to offer?
Yes, Mr. Chair, very briefly. Dr. Russell is on vacation, so I'll do the director's report this morning. 2 items occurred at the board that the commission may be interested in. The first was redistricting, and I'm not going to try and summarize where the board went on that. It was a fairly lengthy hearing. I don't think that the community of Montecito is affected by redistricting really at all. You will remain in the first district. There was some discussion of perhaps having the first district include Cuyama, which was quite interesting. Not something that we've done before, but it is contiguous. So the board will be taking this up again, I believe, on August 2nd. And I'm sure the discussion will continue, and the board will make decisions as they see fit. The other issue, and I believe Commissioner Burrows asked me about it, was what can the county do about smart meters? And the Board of Supervisors actually conducted a hearing at the request of both Supervisor Farr and Supervisor Labanino on July 5th. I believe that the Pacific Gas and Electric Company and California Edison were present at the board, made presentations. Essentially, the board concluded that they didn't have jurisdiction over smart meters, and they requested that a letter be sent to the California Public Utilities Commission to request that people in communities be able to opt out of the smart meter program. So I believe that was the only action the board took. There is a board letter online available that provides some information about those if any of your commissioners are interested. And that's, I think, all I have to report from the board.
Very good. Thank you. We'll move on to our standard agenda. Mr. Villalobos, do you want to read item 1 into the record?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Montecito Planning Commission will receive a briefing on the historic stone walls of Montecito presented by Dr. Judith Ichkanian, Neighborhood Defense League, HLAC Commissioners Sue Adams and Jamie Brown, and Craftsman Ozzie DeRoss. Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Brown.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm actually waiting for my other fellow commissioner, come on, who's going to lead us off, and then we'll give you a moment to enjoy your start of the day with a tour through Montecito walls. So.
Good morning. We're very pleased to be with you this morning, Commissioners. Hello, Chair overall, and I know most of you, we've been serving the county a long time on our commissions, but I'm a member of the 1st District of the Historic Landmarks Commission. Jamie Brown is my colleague, my fellow commissioner, and just wanted to remind you something that you probably don't need reminding of, but the purpose of our commission, which is to promote the economic welfare and the prosperity of the county by preserving and protecting those sites, buildings and structures, works of art, and other objects having a special interest or aesthetic character for the county. It is our commission and our pleasure to be able to protect our historic sites for the education of our young people, for the education of the people who visit us, and also to protect our character and our culture. There are some projects coming forward that will be particularly of interest to you and certainly to the Commission. Some of our oldest, most venerable walls, particularly those in the 1st District in Montecito, as well as the Old Mission. Those are some of the oldest walls in the county, if not in California. So you can see our keen interest in this subject. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Jamie Brown, 1st District Commissioner.
Thank you again. And by way of introduction to the slideshow, in November 2010, Chair of the HLAC, John Woodward, tasked Commissioner Adams and myself to put together a bus tour through Montecito looking at the historic walls. And as we started this, the attention to this particular structure was brought to our attention by Dr. Ishkanian, who's here today and will be leading our slideshow. And Dr. Ishkanian recognized the enormous hand-honed work that had gone into these particular structures. They're the vertical structure. We have a lot of horizontal structures in our trees and buildings, but these are really the vertical cement that brings us together and really adds the beauty to the character of the neighborhood. So Dr. Ishkanian is president of the Neighborhood Defense League, and she was certainly attracted to the wall's beauty and concern for their survival. Commissioner Adams and I decided the bus tour with 11 commissioners, you're a very small commission compared to ours, was rather cumbersome. So we went out on a caravan just with 4 of us, and we were accompanied by Ozzie DeRoss, who is actually one of the craftsmen, and he was terribly sorry. He was to be here with us today, but he had an unexpected conflict, so he sends his severe apologies, and we hope we can bring him to another day for him to meet you personally. But Dr. Ishkanian and I have now given this presentation to the Montecito Association and to HLAC, so we're getting fairly versed in what Ozzie says, so we might be able to answer your questions. I prepared a handout that's here on the desk, and all it just tracks the slides because we move very fast in order to keep to you on your timeline. And so, it might just later on, if you want to know where these particular walls and slides were, you'll have this thumbprint. So at this point, I'm ready to play Vanna White for you and see if I can do the slideshow and sit back and enjoy our presentation from your board chairs. So Dr. Ishkanian, would you please come forward? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I would like to say that Commissioner Burrows took this tour, a much longer tour, with Ozzie DeRoss about 6 years ago. So this is an abbreviated version for the sake of everyone. And I would like to say it is intended to be an impressionistic view rather than a big fact thing. That is not the right slide. So I'll wait till you start. There we go. Our theme is man and nature in harmony. And before we begin, if you would pause there, here are a few things to train your eye before the slides will go very fast. First of all the old Montecito walls are built from local Santa Barbara sandstone. And the legendary names that you will recognize in Santa Barbara are on the roll call of these craftsmen that built these walls. DeRoss, Dal Armi, Arnaldi, Buzella, Di Loretto, many others who I could mention and go on and on. The old walls, one of which you're looking at right there, are of solid hewn rock with tongue and groove holding them together. Tremendously labor-intensive form of stonework. Now, the new rock walls we're going to look at in this slideshow are concrete block with sandstone facing, and I will call your attention to those later on. But the basic styles you will see that characterize Upper Montecito in particular are these. Rural Italian style, like the one you're looking at there. They're irregular, pentagonal shape in a random weave. The next kind is more formal, the rectangular shaped symmetrical stone masonry called ashlar, A-S-H-L-A-R, ashlar with mortar filling. Later on, toward the end of our slideshow, in the oldest part of Montecito, we'll see the stacked stone that is farm style, utilitarian farm style. And last, we will see round, tumbled creek rocks held together with mortar. Last, Watch for how our property owners over time have respected the walls and accommodated them, whatever the fashion of the day. So let's begin our tour and begin with a house that Ozzie DeRoss's father built, because craftsmanship is a family affair passed it through generations. And here we are with our Sue Adams, our commissioner, and Ozzie DeRoss, ready to begin our tour. This is where we begin, Ortega Ridge and East Valley Road, where they meet at San Carlos Ranch, and then on Feather Hill Ranch, which is framed by the vista of the mountains behind. And we meander along East Valley Road. Ribbons of walls continue, blending old and new, humble and grand. Rocks and trees, old rock tumbled. There's our English garden between two sets of walls. There's the tumbled rocks. Now stop a moment, Jamie, because this is the ashlar, which is the rectangular walls with the mortar, very formal. And many of the old estates you will recognize have that style, but equally grand is the rustic Italian. And moving along, we see the old walls on East Valley headed west, integrated with the trees. Here's the curve at Knollwood, tight, beautiful, well kept, but right across the street, tumble down walls in disrepair. And who's to fix this? That wall in particular, if you would pause, Jamie, that wall is, as all of the East Valley Road walls, that's Highway 192 and is managed by the Caltrans State Highway Division. And so we move along and see the old walls with a new wall behind, but respected, not torn down, kept for their beauty. And here we see man and nature living together. The craftsman went around the old tree. Here's a mailbox perched on top of a wall. A row of mailboxes, still loving the walls. And a rose growing right out of the stone wall. Privacy is what walls are all about, and there's different ways of handling it. Some wonderful, some not so wonderful, but there's a chain link fence, gives privacy all right. But here's a beautiful way, a modern, inexpensive wall, but look at the sandstone rocks in the foreground, keeping the theme of the sandstone rocks. Beautiful. And going west, we see a variety of styles. There's Casa de Herrera with 4 tiers of rock walls, one on top of the other. And very near Casa de Herrera, well, also is the bougainvillea, the landscaping. This is the one I was thinking of, Mount Carmel Church with the ashlar. See the ashlar? You start picking it out right away. We're going up San Ysidro Lane now to the old Bernard Maybeck estate, which was one of the estates that set the tone for the rock fashion that we come to know and love. The Maybeck estate, along with the Riven Rock icon of Montecito. And right next to it is something, if you would stop, Commissioner Brown, let us take a look at this. Here is a huge sandstone rock next to the Riven Rock, but look at the stone toolings still left in this rock. They never hewn this rock. You can see how labor-intensive and expensive this process is, which is why the old stone walls are of such value. They're of limited number now. And we're going to move on and show you Picacho Lane with the stone facing. Beautiful, pride of workmanship. Look, no mortar at all in these stone-faced walls, but beautiful in their own right. And Upper Mountain Drive also has these rocks. You begin to train your eye to recognize them. Here is the Para Grande, the stacked stone farm style. Here is many generations of farm style thrown together, utilitarian. There is Old Spanish Town at the Sycamore Canyon curve with a tree that had grown right through the oldest of walls. And here we begin Camino Viejo. I'd love to have you drive along there. These frame the old estates, Jones, Gray, those, all the way up to the Riviera and a whole nother style. But back to Montecito, our bridges are works of art. This is Romero Canyon Bridge. They deserve attention because many of them are disappearing, as is the identification. You can barely tell that says Romero Creek Bridge. Who will remember which is what, as this one exemplifies? They need to be kept identified. Oak Creek Bridge, very well kept. Look at the perfect tumbled creek rocks next, a work of art. The grand finale is Oprah's house. But Oprah's house is also the old Bacon estate, which Ozzie DeRoss himself worked on as a young man. But her estate, the fact that she hasn't touched any of the walls, shows that newcomers or old-timers, everyone who comes here marvels at the lush landscape and the man-made walls, because that harmony, working together, says to the world, what a beautiful place. So we end our tour with the good wishes for a newfound keen eye for our walls and a desire to preserve this treasure of Montecito. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just wanted to conclude with a couple of remarks, and I hope that this will do for you what it's done for us and for the public. I think you will now become so aware of the rocks, these rock walls, that as you drive around Montecito and around the county of Santa Barbara, your eye will suddenly land on them. And we would love to hear from the public about walls that they're interested in, so they can contact us through the county P&D to let us know, and we'll put their walls in our slideshow. Certainly, the historic fabric of Montecito is a very important cultural resource and very important to the character of our community. As you're aware, its protection is called for in the Montecito Community Plan, Goal CRM1, page 120. Commissioner Adams and I look very forward to working with your commission, if directed, to update a list of historically important sites in Montecito per the community plan, action item CRM 212. To that end, I'm very pleased to announce today that HLAC has directed our 2012 annual historic inventory report to cover a portion of Montecito. And these are done by a outside contractor, and then they're retained. These binders are retained with historic reports here at the county for scholarly review, for commission review, and for staff use. So we're very happy that that will be in Montecito this year, and look forward to presenting to you when it's completed, which will be about a year from now. So we are welcome to your questions, and thank you for your time, and thank you for your interest, and thank you for protecting such a beautiful community.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. You do have a couple lights on here for questions. Commissioner Idelson?
Yes, I personally want to thank the three of you for what you've done. Commissioner Adams, Commissioner Brown, and Dr. Iskanian. This is a wonderful thing, a wonderful service you're providing to the community and to the county, to us as commissioners here, so that we can use this in making some of our judgment. But it's so valuable, the assets in Montecito, the walls, the things, but I do appreciate what you've done. Thank you so much.
Ms. Burrows?
Thank you. And I join my fellow commissioners in thanking you for this work you have done. It's a beautiful slideshow. I would suggest that you consider making it available to Rotary clubs, schools. It's a beautiful and it's a very interesting project. So thank you for that. Thank you for the work you have done, and we look forward to working with you on any appropriate thing. Thank you.
Ms. Brown, I've got just a couple of things. First, I've got a question from Mr. Villalobos. During the presentation, what was on the monitor here that we can see in the hearing room was not the slideshow. Will the slideshow air in the rebroadcast?
Mr. Chair, I believe it was showing. When I looked up at the monitor, I believe they did cut back to Dr. Ishkanian.
Well, maybe that
at some
was what
point. I think they
one
were.
time I looked at it. I can see-
They were
okay.
going back and forth.
So
I
it
believe.
will be included in the rebroadcast.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Yes.
If anybody watches, that's a good thing. So,
Yes, sir.
The second thing, Ms. Brown, when you came before our workshop a month ago and asked to make this presentation, we talked briefly about what the outcome might be. And although he's not here to indicate it himself, Commissioner Phillips indicated an interest. So I would pass that along to you and suggest that you be in touch with him and see where that goes. And he would be a representative not only of the community but from this commission as well. And then just the last thing, just personally, I mean, I've lived here for quite a while now, and I think we're all aware at some level that of the ambiance of the community, but that encapsulated it very well, and it certainly raised my awareness of it. So along with the other commissioners, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Idelson?
I just have one more comment. If you are doing another tour and you have room for another person, I would really enjoy viewing this firsthand with any one of you.
I have something. Yes, you know, I've been pitching. Yes, we'll give you a tour if you book us. But I keep wanting to stop at Arnaldi's for lunch after, because that's where all the stonecutters go, and the whole walls are covered with the men who built these walls. But I can't, everybody's on a diet, and no one wants to go to lunch. But, but the invitation is open.
We would welcome all of you, and we'll put together a special tour if that would be of interest to the commission. And this is, by the way, the one thing we didn't say, this is only the tip of the iceberg, as they say. And you'll drive home and you'll see what I mean. The inventory is substantial. So we would love to do that. And thank you again for your attention and your compliments. Appreciated.
Thank you. Moving on to our next standard agenda item, item number 2. Mr. Villalobos, would you read that into the record, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Paul Zink, agent for the owners, Monte and Maria Wilson, to consider case number 11CDH11, application filed on March 3rd, 2011, and to determine that the project is exempt from pursuant to Section 15303E of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Maybe the first thing we ought to do is commissioners ex parte or site visits, anything like that. Well, Commissioner Kostenker.
Am I like? Oh, there we go. Yes, I did do a drive-by of that area. Okay.
I also did a drive-by. I didn't have any ex parte. Okay, very good. Ms. Liu?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Today I will be presenting the Wilson Garage Project. The project is located at 116 Oroki Street, just off of North Jameson Lane in the coastal portion of Montecito. The proposed project is for an 800 square foot garage. Also constructed at the time of the garage will be a wall that is exempt from permits. The surface of the wall and portions of the garage will be covered by vines, and existing vegetation located between the garage and neighboring property would be maintained to the maximum extent feasible. Here we see the north and south elevations of the garage and the east and west elevations. The property is located in the 20R1 zone. The intent of the R1 zone is to protect the residential characteristics of an area and to promote an environment suitable for family life. The project is consistent with this requirement because it will be providing covered parking, improving the aesthetics of the area. The structure itself is of moderate mass and height and is consistent with the architectural style of the neighborhood and the existing residents. and the wall would help to reduce noise levels to exterior spaces. Article 2, Section 35-123 indicates that fences and walls up to 8 feet in height are exempt when located within the side yard setback, and consistent with that, the proposed wall is exempt from permits. Coastal Plan Policy 2-6 requires that adequate services be available to serve the proposed development. The project is also consistent with this requirement, as it is currently and would continue to be served by the Montecito Sanitary District, Montecito Water District, and Montecito Fire District. Montecito Community Plan noise policies require that noise-sensitive uses be protected, and residences are considered noise-sensitive uses. Consistent with that requirement, construction hours for the garage would be limited, and as stated previously, the wall would help to reduce freeway noise. The project was reviewed by the Montecito Board of Architectural Review. The MBAR found the design to be appropriate for the site, and they requested that the project return for preliminary and final review following approval by your commission. They also requested maintenance of vegetation located between the garage and wall and the neighboring property. In summary, the project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the Montecito Community Plan and Coastal Land Use Plan, is compliant with the requirements of the Article 2 Coastal Zoning Ordinance, and receives support from the Montecito Board of Architectural Review. Therefore, staff recommends that you make the required findings for the project as amended in the staff memo dated July 25th, 2011, which you should have received. That you determine the project exempt pursuant to CEQA Section 15303E and approve the project subject to conditions. That will conclude my presentation. And just one more note on that July 25th memo, it is an update of some of the project conditions per discussion with County Council. That will conclude my presentation.
At this time, we have any questions from the commissioners to Ms. Liu? I do have one a very quick question. Was any study done on the noise levels at this property?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I don't believe that a specific noise study was done, and I'm getting a no from the architect as well.
Okay, thank you. Looks like the applicant is represented.
Can you talk from the podium?
Yes.
Thanks.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Paul Zink, and I'm the architect for this garage. I didn't prepare a PowerPoint, but I do have some extra site photographs as well as some pictures from the 101 freeway, if that is of interest to you. Wanted to reiterate the fact that this parcel is existing, non-conforming. It does not have a 2-car garage, and it's the way it is, and so what we are providing is a 3-car garage for the owner. The issues with the landscaping along the side, the phrase that was used to preserve the existing hedge to the maximum extent possible, what really boils down to is the soils report, and the soils report sometimes requires you to over-X 5 feet beyond the perimeter of the building, which then, if my building is 10 feet from the property line, that leaves less of the original root base of the hedge that'll be around. So if we have to lose the hedge due to the soils report conditions, then we will landscape behind the garage. My hope is with the building department that we don't need to get a soils report and we can use the building code minimum requirements because it is not a habitable building. But that's another issue. The way the project is presented to you is we are going to landscape the wall and we will landscape the garage if the hedge is to be removed. So if you have any questions or you want to see some additional photographs, just ask.
Are there any questions for him? We might, Scott, say? Yeah, question?
Oh, go ahead. Yes, I did have one question. In the site plan that was provided, I get that there's this hedge, and then there's the proposed wall. What did that hedge extend to where the proposed wall prior? I mean, did that go all along the property line?
The hedge was continuous from the back of the property to the front of the property. And where the sound wall is being placed, which is like 50 feet wide, we will be removing the hedge. And I locate the wall 3 feet from the property line, and then we're planting vines along that wall. So a portion of the hedge will be removed. But where the garage is to happen, where it's 10 feet from the property line, our intent is to maintain that hedge. And then where the existing house is, that hedge will remain untouched.
Yeah, I get
And there's a
that.
slight
Yeah.
overlap just having to do with the sound. I don't want to have a narrow thing and then have sound sneak around the corner. I'd rather have a 2 to 5 foot overlap between the building and the sound wall that we're building.
So then, following up on one of the other commissioners' questions, I think it was Chairman Overall, if a sound study wasn't done, who's to determine that this wall is actually needed? I don't get that.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, a couple of things. First, I should reiterate that this wall is actually exempt from permits. It is going to be constructed at the time of the garage and was noted by the MBAR, so I've included it in the discussion. But in order to construct a wall, even if it is providing sound attenuation, in this situation, because it is exempt from permits, there wouldn't be a requirement to justify why it is required or for staff to review it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. There are no further questions. I do have I'm going to open it to public comment. I have a speaker slip from Sophia Hollenbosch. Holbosch, I guess. Please.
So I actually live at 130 Roki, which is adjacent to 116.
If you could pull the microphone.
I've actually lived there for 40 years, all my life. So I know what the sound is like, how it has gotten a little worse, but I personally don't think a sound wall is going to do anything, especially when the sound wall is adjacent to the house and is actually adjacent to the first house, so it's not actually going to do anything for freeway noise. The freeway noise comes basically across all the residences, all the roads, so a sound wall, I think, is kind of pointless, but it's a personal choice. And as she said, it's within the non-permit requirement. So, but my main issue is the height of the garage and even the placement of the garage. I came to one of the previous meetings, and what we had agreed on is that we would meet with Mr. Zink, and he would tell us the placement, the height. We met with him, but he didn't know exactly where the garage was going to go. He didn't mark the height. So I really don't know exact locations of this garage. We do have ocean views from our house, and so I have a feeling that this garage is going to block part of our ocean views. What is also currently blocking our ocean views is this hedge. It's actually not a hedge. It's an unkept collection of diseased myoporums. And so I don't know whether these trees are ever going to be maintained. It sounds like some of them are even going to be pulled out. But I have a concern with that particular area of the property because it is our ocean view. And so it's really unclear what exactly the effect of this structure is going to have on our ocean view, our property. And Mr. Zink has not addressed that so far. And so that is my concern. I've lived there for 40 years, as I said, and I plan to live there for 40 plus more years. I mean, I recognize some of your faces because I went to local schools, and so I do want to maintain that kind of feel of the neighborhood. What also concerns me, I'm looking at this map, and it shows that there's some off-site parking on Oroki Street. A year ago, actually, prior to Mr. Wilson purchasing the home with his wife, the previous owners actually removed that off-site parking. They re-landscaped it. So now there's a hedge where the parking used to be. So, and what they've been doing is parking on the street, blocking the ingress and egress of the rest of the residents. So I just wanted to point that out because that is not off-site parking. That is the road now, and the previous owner chose to remove that parking region as well. So I just wanted to add that as a note to, because I'm not sure, I'm sure the current owner isn't even aware of that as well. But I mean, we're just trying to maintain as a group of neighbors, because there's been several neighbors that have lived there for many, many years. We want to maintain that nice, quiet Montecito Lane feel, very family-oriented feel. And we don't really want people who come in, live in a house for a few years, and then sell it and move on. I mean, everyone has their right to do that, but we try to maintain a more permanent, family-oriented feel to the residences in that particular neighborhood. There's not very many. There's only 5 of us, 5 homes, so we try to maintain that feel. So I'm not sure if Mr. Zink can address the height and whether that indeed will be a problem for our views. Right now we can't see anything because of the overgrown hedges, which are probably like 50 feet now.
Why don't we
40 feet.
Why don't we give him an opportunity to respond?
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to respond. I do have...
Pull this up, we can hear you a little better.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. I do have some photographs standing in our property, looking back at the applicant's property, as well as standing at our property, looking at the hedge and where the garage is going to be. If we go back to the aerial photograph or my site plan, either one of those, on the upper part of the property where the blue line is, there is existing some avocado trees that right there where the arrow is, a little bit to the right, there's an existing avocado trees that are on our property. The applicant and I did meet at the site, and the purpose of the meeting was for me to point out that what I'm proposing of a garage at 13 feet 2 inches is shorter than the existing hedge. My client didn't plant the hedge, and I was able to prove with a story pole that here's the top of the pole, the hedge is much taller than us, thus whatever we're blocking is already being obscured by the existing hedge, not to take into account that there's existing avocado trees that the applicant has to look through. The applicant is coming
You're using the word applicant.
I mean applicant, the
neighbor?
The appellant, or no, the
neighbor.
Thank you very much. The neighbor who has a concern with us building the garage in this location has a view that they enjoy. It is a private view, and we all understand the difference between a private view and a public view. What I wanted to determine is what was this private view that was being compromised. I wasn't allowed to enter the property. I found out later that when they stand on their roof, they have a view of the ocean. It's not when they're on the first floor and it's a single-story house.
I'll tell you what, you indicated you had some photographs. Can we see those, please?
Yeah. May I ask?
Ms. Burrows?
Yes, could you please point out the recent speakers, the neighbor's home, before we see the photographs?
Oh, great.
No, back on the slide. Yes, on that. Where does the neighbor live?
Okay, I see it.
Actually, right where the person is. That's
Right.
you, right there?
Okay.
Great, thank you. It's just like we're trying to get oriented who you are.
There's 2 photographs that I'd like to point out to you. The first one is I'm standing at where the garage is being proposed, and there's the 2 cars and a little carport shed, and then behind there is the avocado trees. And in between the 2 avocado trees, you can see a slight glimpse of a roof beyond. I'll move that pan.
So we're facing north, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. This second view is looking at where the garage is going to be located. There's existing asphalt area going towards the left where the play structure is. That is where the garage is, and there's the existing hedge. It is a myoporum. It is suffering, but it's not dead. It's diseased, yes. Some places in town they have been ripped and they died completely. Other places they always try again in the spring, so we haven't completely given up hope as a community that this disease will take all of them. But you can tell that the hedge is much taller than the proposed garage. The existing garage that's being proposed blends with the existing architecture of the original house. The original house is a single story that has a plate or a parapet at 14 feet 6 inches. It's what we have to work with. The style of architecture is matching, so we have this garage that we're proposing.
In this picture, which direction are we facing?
You are facing towards the ocean. So
we're looking south.
The concern that the commission has in front of them is to determine this private view and whether or not it's classified as a significant private view, and to determine the impacts that this construction will have on someone's private view.
Certainly, but please come to the podium. What? Just wait until you're on the record.
So this hedge used to be about 8 to maybe...
If you could pull the...
Sorry.
There you go.
Can you hear me? So this hedge used to be about 8 foot, an 8-foot hedge, probably 5 years ago, but then the previous owner continued to basically neglect it. So it's much taller now. It's gotten probably another, I don't know, 5 feet. So it continues to grow. There's no, I mean, I don't really define this as a hedge. It doesn't have a consistent height to the top. It's just trees that are planted together that are allowed to grow. One thing that I didn't mention earlier is, so the height of the house, it's 14.6, but it's actually 2 heights. The region where the garage is going to be placed is adjacent to an area of the house which is much lower. So we're going to have a higher garage, a lower home, and then a higher home. So there's going to be this kind of step height to it, which also will, I think, visually be unappealing as well.
Okay. If you would come back up and maybe show us the site plan and...
You have a site plan there, or I can pull one out.
Mr. Zink, while they're looking for the site plan, what is the, and I apologize, I just am getting too old to be able to read these little 8x10s. What is the proposed height of the garage that we're talking about?
The proposed height is 13 feet 2 inches.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I do have a section that was included in the plans. It has a 10-foot plate, and then it has a flat roof with a slight parapet going around.
Yeah, I did see all of that when I looked at the larger plans, but now I'm here at the hearing. I can't seem to read anything here, so.
What I would like to go back to is the purpose of the sound wall. We all know that landscaping does not significantly mitigate the sounds of noise, and there is noise in the way that they have their pool and their outdoor living space. The sound wall is being placed. We didn't do a sound study. It's not 12 or 15 feet tall, but we do know that an 8-foot high wall will benefit some. It'll be better than having no wall or no landscape, or just having landscaping. So the purpose of the wall is to make the area at the pool a lot more enjoyable. And then the height of where the garage is also acting as a sound wall for further blocking noise that will affect the motor court and also neighbors beyond. So what we're trying to do along this area is to create a noise buffer within some reason. And then at the upper top you can see the 2 avocado trees that I have shown, right, correct, and they are existing. They were planted before my client purchased the property, as well as the hedge. He just hasn't maintained it because we're waiting for this construction to happen.
Okay. Ms. Burrows?
Is there a plan to maintain the hedge, to trim it down?
If that is a condition, we'll maintain that. The only condition that I would like to say is that if we have to take down the hedge because of the reasons of construction, we'll work with the Montecito BAR and do replacement landscaping.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other comments? I guess not. Let's see. We've had public comment. I have no further speaker slips. I'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for any further questions or comments. I see none. Well, maybe I do.
Well, are we in deliberation or?
That's where we're headed.
Okay. In reviewing the staff report, I do find this is consistent with the neighborhood, and MBAR has given it some favorable reviews. My concern is the hedge, and it's not clear to me if we can include as a condition maintaining a certain height on the hedge. I am concerned about the neighbor's view being impacted, although I think that that is beyond our purview. So I would guess I would ask staff, can we condition this on a hedge? What are the rules of Montecito in regard to hedges? I do see many of them maintained at 6 or 8 feet.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Burrows, we do not monitor the height of people's hedges except when they're in the road right-of-way and could affect safety issues on roadways. So I would strongly recommend we not impose a condition to maintain the hedge at a certain height.
So may I?
Okay, please.
So this is the kind of thing that is left to the goodwill of the neighbors and our, I suppose, unwritten good neighborhood policy to work with the neighbors on this kind of thing.
Yes.
Commissioner Gostanker?
Yeah, the question that occurs for me is that, given what you've now said, Ms. Black, this really is something that, this does actually go back to MBAR, that this is like, and that historically, I think, is within the purview of MBAR to manage the landscape plan so that notes are, there's just notes made to the property owner for few. I mean, they were already saying request maintenance of hedge material between the properties to a maximum extent feasible. That is from an MBAR statement. So that would be, it wouldn't be us that would be conditioning it. It would be an MBAR, whatever we call their conditions or recommendations.
I think we have to condition. No. Go ahead.
Okay, we
Ms.
have to
Black.
condition, they have to recommend.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Godstinker, I think what the MBAR is speaking to is actually maintaining the vegetation, not maintaining it at a certain height. That is certainly within their purview and a typical requirement of the MBAR, but they don't typically regulate the height of vegetation either. It would raise the same issues as would the Commission's conditioning.
I will support the project, and I'll make a motion to approve it with a modification to condition number 3, which relates to the vegetation maintenance requirement. Ms. Liu and I talked briefly before the hearing started. In order to avoid potential conflicts over interpretation somewhere down the road, I would feel much better if we specified or delegated in the requirement the specifying of either the percentage of coverage or number of plants or some specific value that goes to addressing what is adequate screening. And I think the MBAR could do that, or probably better than we can, actually. But Ms. Liu, did you develop anything further on that?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if you'll turn to page B-1, at the bottom of the page, there's condition number 3, vegetation maintenance. And I propose to add a sentence, second to the last sentence, that would read, the species, size, and quantity of plantings shall be reviewed and approved by the Board of Architectural Review prior to final BAR approval. That would get at both the size and quantity of plantings.
Okay. What number on B1? 3. This condition right here. With that modification to the condition, I will make a motion to approve the staff recommendation. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms.
Mr.
Black?
Chair, before you call for the question. I assume that that motion incorporates the July 25th memo as
Yes.
well? Okay.
All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. And I would, for the benefit of the neighbor and as a request to the architect and the owner, I'm not even sure that our good neighbor policy is unwritten, but in any event, it's part of the fabric of the community, and the more it's exercised, the better. So to the extent you can cooperate with the neighbor, it would be a plus for everybody. Thank you all. Let's see. I've heard it plenty.
It's actually
I think it-
it's in the.
Montecito Association, Diane says. I'd like to take about a 5-minute break, and we'll come back for item number 3. Mr. Villalobos, if you would read that into the record, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Jennifer Foster, agent for Lauren Booth, owner, to consider the following: 11 MOD 1 and 11 CDH 9 applications filed on February 17, 2011, and to determine the project is exempt pursuant to sections 15301 L4, 1303 A and E, 1304B, and 1305A of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you. First, I'll turn to my commission for site visits and ex parte communication. Ms. Gottsaker?
I did not have any ex parte communication, and I did go on a site visit. Gosh, anybody remember that when that was? Yeah, it was middle of April, I think, was when I went on the site visit. Yeah, that's exactly when it was. It was the week after.
Ms. Burrows?
Thank you. I also did a very extended site visit sometime, I think, in the spring.
And Mr. Idelson?
Yeah, I did a site visit sometime in the spring also. I think it was in April.
I also did a site visit when the MBAR visited the site with the story poles up. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Ritterbeck.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Members of the Commission, I also have prepared and circulated a memo that added a few findings per County Council's request. Additionally, there was a change to a reference of attachment E, which is attachment G in the staff report. My name is Jay Ritterbeck. I'm the planner for the Booth project. This project is located in southeastern Montecito, south of the 101, and near the eastern end of Fernald Point. The subject parcel is 0.32 acres in size, zoned 1E1, single family, urban residential, and within the California Coastal Commission's appeal jurisdiction. On the next series of slides, I'll walk through the proposed project plans. Previous development on the site included a swimming pool that had been constructed as part of an overall estate plan, with the property located to the west, which is the lower section of the slide. Views of the site show the pool as well as the different styles of architecture. There's the pool that was established as part of this estate plan, and now under ownership of this property, the Booth residence. This is now common ownership with these two properties. Next, we'll look at the proposed project after the removal of the pool. Proposed is a new 2,664 square foot, 2-story single-family dwelling, a new 524 square foot detached 2-car garage, a number of trellises around the single-family dwelling, which are all consistent with the string line policy for coastal bluff-top houses. There's also an additional view easement that was attached to the property upon sale, which the proposed project is consistent with. There's also an existing site wall between the two properties, a portion of which will be removed. The proposed project is consistent or meets all applicable setbacks except for one section on the eastern end between these two properties, where there is a 1 foot 2 inch modification request, which is part of this project. Next is a series of views of the proposed elevations of the new dwelling and garage from the south, from the north, from the adjacent property also owned by the Booths, and a view from the property to the west. This project is exempt from SEQR review pursuant to sections 15301, 303, 304, and 305. And as conditioned, the project is consistent with the County Comprehensive Plan, including the Montecito Community Plan and the Coastal Land Use Plan. It is also consistent as conditioned with the Montecito Land Use Development Code requirements. It also has support from the Montecito Board of Architectural Review. Staff recommends that the Commission make the required findings of approval as amended per the memo, determine the project exempt from CEQA, and approve the modification and approve the coastal development permit subject to the conditions of approval specified in Attachment B. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Black, you.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to point out that you did receive 2 letters, I believe, on this project. One from Jennifer Foster, and that was timely received on Friday, but it's a fairly lengthy submittal. And then one 2-page letter from Patricia Klink, and I believe we received that today, this morning. If you wanted to consider Mrs. Klink's letter, you would need to vote that into the record, as it does exceed the 1-page limit for items received after Friday at noon.
I'll speak for myself first. I have not had an opportunity to read Mrs. Klink's letter. I did visit their home on the site visit. And as to, I indicated to Ms. Foster, I think due to some difficulties with email at my end or somebody else's end, I was unable to read her memo. I did get it this morning. I have requested her to cover as much of the material as she feels appropriate in her presentation, to hear from public and questions from the Commission. And if at that point in this hearing she would like us to read the memo, then we'll take a break and we can read the memo and come back. It may be that most of the material, the relevant material, will have been covered. So I just want to let everybody know that both Mrs. Klink's letter and the Foster submission, although it was done timely, are not part of our review if the rest of my commissioners concur with that.
Mr. Chair, actually, I don't believe you can exclude Ms. Foster's letter.
Okay.
Because it was timely submitted.
Okay. Well, let's see whether we have to take a break and read it or not, though. Okay? We'll turn to the applicant.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jennifer Foster, the land use agent for the owner, Ms. Booth. And This morning, our presentation, first is going to start out with a few words from the owner, Ms. Lauren Booth, and then Mary Androlitis, one of the architects on the projects, is going to go through the site plan and the architectural plan, and then I'm going to say a few words after that. Thank you.
Very good.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Booth, and I think I've met you briefly before. And I just want to let you know a little bit of my background and what the intentions are with the property. I grew up in Pasadena and currently live on a ranch in the San Joaquin Valley, and purchased the property, the existing 1801, in about 2 or 3 years ago, and am looking forward to doing more things in Montecito. My family has a long history in Santa Barbara. My grandfather lived 1201 Channel Drive forever, right next door to the Biltmore, and my dad had a house in Sea Meadow when he was alive, and when he passed away, they sold the house, and so I'm very excited to get back into the community. And I have a younger brother, Scott Brittingham, that's very active in the community and lots of charitable events, and we purchased the property next door for what I would say was well over market value, and the stipulations that are being asked of us currently were not part of the purchase price. We did a view easement that everybody seemed very happy with at the time, and I'm kind of disappointed that we're sort of in the quagmire that we're in. And if you have any questions for me, I have 2 children, and I'd like to do a separate house because we have one grandchild. I actually have one grandchild already, but he has 4 legs, but I have another one on the way. So that's sort of our intentions. And the landscape, we hired Eric Nagelman to do our landscaping design for us, and I'm really looking forward to what we can get done on Fernald Point. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mary Androlitis with Newman Mendro Androlitis, the architect for Ms. Booth's project. I'd like to elaborate a bit on how the current design of her home has evolved over the past several months. Thank you. As she just stated, it's intended as a home away from home for her children and their growing families. The house is proposed on a legal lot, and the architectural style is contemporary, purposefully intended to emulate the architecture of her existing home to the east, and intended to function as a standalone residence. Like the majority of the homes within the private gated community of Fernald Point, the style's contemporary. We've proposed a home that, like its neighbors, takes advantage of both mountain and ocean views. Over the past several months, we've made a series of revisions to the originally proposed plans as a result of input by the Montecito BAR, and in particular, issues raised by the westerly neighbors, John and Patricia Klink. This is an overall site plan of the property, including the neighboring properties to the east and west. As you can see, this lot is much narrower than those around it. The width ranges from 33 feet 5 inches at its narrowest point to 37 feet 8 inches at its widest. With such a narrow parcel and given the required setbacks, it's only practical to develop it with a 2-story residence. All of the homes in this area are 2 to 3 stories. This plan depicts the originally proposed location for the home, including the original location of the second floor, which is dotted in a darker shade of gray. You can also see the Klink's residence to the west, which is below it in this image, and their 2-story dotted in and shaded in gray. This next plan depicts the current proposed location as well as the originally proposed, which is dotted in red. The first floor of the house has been pushed back to the north 10 feet 9 inches from its original proposed location, and the second floor has been pushed even further back, 32 feet north of the original location. These changes were made to mitigate secondary ocean view impacts to the Klink's second floor bedrooms. With both plans, primary views are unimpeded, as well as most secondary views. The property is unencumbered with any development restrictions, with the exception of a view plane easement at the south end, shown with the blue crosshatching. The building string line, dotted in red, is the primary limiting factor for development at the south end of the property. There is a proposed ground level trellis that it's located at minimum 10 feet and at maximum 24.5 feet from the string line. The first floor of the house is set back 19 feet to 35 feet from the string line. That's an additional 10 foot 9 inches than originally proposed. The second floor, again shown dotted, is 32 feet further back from the original proposed location. It's been pulled back a total of 21 feet 5 inches from the extent of the first floor. These revisions required a redesign of the second floor plan and the loss of an ocean view from Ms. Booth's master bathroom. As currently designed, the second floor overlaps the north end of the 2-story portion of the Klinks home by approximately 18 feet 1 inch. And as you can see, the 2-story portion of the Klink home runs a length of approximately 73 feet 2 inches.
Ms. Androlaitis,
Yes.
just to interrupt you for a second, I have a request that you use a pointer.
Okay, sorry about that. This is that view plane easement, the string line. This area is the trellised area I referred to. This is the extent of the first floor. This is the extent of the second floor and the neighboring second floor. The required side yard setbacks for the parcel are 5 feet and shown in purple on either side. The required front yard setback is 20 feet from Fernald Point Lane. In response to the Klink's concerns, we've moved the structure an additional 2.5 feet to the east towards Ms. Boo's existing residence, for a minimum setback on the west side of 7.5 feet at its closest point, and in fact it exceeds this up to a maximum of 12 feet 8 inches setback, with a proposed average side yard setback on the west side of 9 feet 10.25 inches. As a result of shifting the house to the east for the benefit of the Klinks, we're requesting approval of a modification to reduce the side yard setback on the east by 14 inches in these two areas shown with the darker purple, about a 12.5 foot length at the entry, and this small area is just a post for the entry porch. The area of the modification is only 1.7% of the entire side yard area, when up to 20% is allowed. Even with the modification, the average side yard setback on the east side is 6 foot 7.25 inches. As pointed out earlier, the second floor of the Klink's residence abuts Miss Booth's property for a length of over 73 feet, and there's a need to create some privacy. We'd originally proposed an 8-foot plaster privacy wall along the west property line. That has been reduced to a 5-foot-high vinyl-coated chain link fence buried within a 6-foot-high Metrosideros hedge. Within the view plane easement, within this cross-hatched area, that fence is proposed to drop to a 3-foot height with a 4-foot hedge per the restrictions of that view plane easement. We have also agreed to preserve a row of existing palm trees at the Klink's request between the two residences for screening. We've augmented those with a row of screening olive trees to provide some separation, privacy, and softness. The section of our second story right here that's closest to the Klink's property is proposed to be covered in ivy to soften the appearance of the structure. We've also added a bioswale along the shared property line to filter and control runoff. We've done a number of revisions to the exterior of the house as well. The ceiling height of the living room, this is the portion most oceanward, the ceiling height was reduced from 11 feet to 10 feet to lower the parapet of the living room. Overall, the height of this portion of the house, the living room, is 13 feet 4 inches. We've reduced the width of the living room chimney above the parapet to about 3 feet. We've reduced the area of window openings and introduced obscure glazing in some areas on the west elevation for privacy. And we've also purposefully juxtaposed those windows with the Klinks to maintain privacy for both homes. We've added some louvered mahogany awnings over windows, as well as a couple of trellises to soften the architecture. This, again, is that 2-story portion that sits closest to the Klink's property that is proposed to be covered in ivy. Here you can see those existing palm trees that will remain, as well as the olive trees that are proposed. And then finally, a couple of renderings of the home. This is as viewed from the Klink's parking area to the north of their residence. And as you can see, the landscaping and the proposed 6-foot hedge do its intended purpose of softening the architecture and screening the house. The final view is as viewed from Ms. Booth's property. And again, you can see how the architecture is intended to emulate her existing home in form and detailing. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Andrews? Mr.
Yeah,
Eidelson?
I wonder if you could help me out. There, as I recall, there were some plantings probably on the Clink side that were forward of the setback line heading out towards the ocean. Do you recall those?
I do not. Forward of the...
Yeah, there were like a couple of trees in there, large trees that were obstructing view. Not obstructing view, they were part of the...
There are not any on Ms. Booth's property. Was
No,
it
on the other property.
On the Clink's
I
property.
didn't ask on the Clink's property that's...
I don't recall exactly where they are. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I don't remember. They're not shown on our plan, and I don't know where those
Okay.
are.
Thank you.
So, since you haven't read my letter, a couple things that I think are important to point out from the letter. One is the Clinks right now do not occupy their home at 1787 Fernald, and they haven't for a while. They're using the home as a short-term vacation rental. And the house right now is also on the market. It's being sold by their trustee in their bankruptcy case. And the marketing materials that they're using for the rental are included as an attachment in my letter, as well as the brochure for the sale of the house. And now what I'd like to do is talk about our MBAR process that we've been going through for quite a while now. As we mentioned, we've been to MBAR on 4 separate occasions. Each time we went back to MBAR, we made modifications to the project in order to respect the requests of the Clinks. Importantly, these were the only neighbors who raised any objections to this project. As Mary mentioned, we pulled the house back, we lowered the ceiling height, we even went so far as to apply for a modification that reduces the side yard setback on the east side to accommodate the Clinks' specific request for additional setback between their property and Ms. Booth's property. After each accommodation was made, including the modification, they continued to object and ask for more changes. At the last MBAR meeting on April 11th, the MBAR had extremely positive comments about the project and all the accommodations we'd made. To quote, they said, "The project is just right and the applicant has compromised successfully. Good balance orienting and massing the house to respect the Clinks' views and privacy. The massing and siding of the proposed house has been modified to allow greater views for the Clinks above and beyond the view easement negotiated with the sale of the lot. The modification allows the house to be sided, allowing the Clinks as much side yard distance as possible. There are primary views from the Clinks house south to the ocean, and there are secondary views to the east and west across neighboring parcels. The proposed project has protected primary views and, to the extent reasonable, secondary views as well." They also said, "The site visit confirmed that moving the house or further reorganizing the massing would not benefit the Clinks' ocean views from their rear bedroom, which in any case predominantly has mountain views. Moreover, the ocean view from this bedroom is a secondary view and therefore does not merit absolute protection." So as we went through the MBAR process, it became very clear that no matter what we did, the Clinks would not be satisfied until what we proposed was to build the house that they had designed a few years ago. That house architecturally matched their house at 1787 Fernald and was set so far back near the road that views of the ocean would have been minimal. However, instead of building that house, the Clinks never obtained building permits and instead sold the parcel to Ms. Booth. And even though county ordinances and policies do not protect private views, Ms. Booth has gone above and beyond to accommodate the Clinks. Their primary views are maintained and even most of their secondary views are maintained. The Montecito architectural guidelines do recommend taking into account neighbors' privacy, and as explained, we have gone to great lengths to do so. And now I'd just like to show a table. Jay, is that you who put it up? Oh, this one right here? Okay. So this is the neighborhood analysis that we had done, and as you can see, every house that's in the gated section of Fernald Point Lane is over the FAR, and some of them quite substantially, including the Clinks, which is 72% over FAR. Our proposal is only 2.5% over FAR. The other thing I want to point out is that there's a variety of architectural styles in this neighborhood. So these are just some of the photos of the homes in beyond the gated portion of Fernald Point Lane. And as you can see, these houses are built out basically from edge of setback to edge of setback. They're 2 to 3 story all the way to the front of the parcels or the beach side of the parcels. And 7 out of 10 of them are what you could call a contemporary style, while the others could loosely be termed Mediterranean. I think that's it. There we go. Okay. So, as we've mentioned, when the Clinks sold this parcel that they created, the only restriction they put on development of the parcel was a view easement on the southern side of the parcel, which this project complies with. So it's very unfair of them to continue to oppose this project. And as you've seen, or maybe you didn't see actually, with the letter I submitted on Friday, we got a letter of support from one of the neighbors. His name is Warren Carpenter, and he's an architect, and he praised the design of our proposal. And once again, the Clinks are the only neighbor who said anything negative about this project. We appreciate that staff and MBAR have recognized how much Ms. Booth has done to accommodate the neighbors, and that this project conforms with the neighborhood and is consistent with the Montecito architectural guidelines, the Montecito zoning ordinance, and the Montecito community plan policies. We've reviewed the findings and the conditions of approval. We agree with them and accept them. And we're confident, based on the submittal materials, the staff report, and the testimony this morning, that you'll have all the information you need to make the findings for approval as recommended by planning staff. I do have a couple things I want to address from the letter that was submitted this morning by Mrs. Klink. One thing is the Klinks keep going back to the project that they got approved a few years ago. And I'd just like to say that has no bearing on this project. This is a new project. They refer to a standard 9-foot side yard setback, when in fact the side yard setback on this parcel is 5 feet. And we more than meet that when you average out our setbacks on both sides of the parcel. On the west side, we have an average 9-foot, 10-inch setback, and we have over a 6-foot setback on the other side. Their letter also states that we're trying to put a house as close to the ocean as possible, and as you could see by the site plan, we are well behind the view easement and well behind the string line. So if we were trying to put a house as close to the ocean as possible, we'd be right up against those lines. And I just want to keep this, make sure that we keep this in mind, that the Klinks are the one who originally created this parcel by obtaining a certificate of compliance. And they had every opportunity to put restrictions on this parcel when they sold it to Ms. Booth. But they wanted to get market rate for this parcel. They wanted to get a market price, so they did. And they only put the view easement restriction on it. And we are set well back from the view easement. And we've been trying to work with them for about a year now. And we're still in this place. So I just wanted to make sure that that is in everybody's mind today, and of course we're here for questions. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Foster at this point? No. Okay, thank you for your presentation. We'll open it for public comment, but I think before we do that, since Ms. Foster referred to the letter by Mrs. Klink and we have not read it, I think we ought to take about a 3-minute hiatus here and let us read that letter since it's now been referred to.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, it's absolutely appropriate to take a break to read the comment letter if you would like, and I just recommend that perhaps maybe you take enough time to read both of the letters, and that way the record is clear that both have been considered, and so however much time that is, we can just do it at the same time rather than deferring. The letter from Ms. Foster as well as the letter from Ms. Klink.
Okay, well, we will take a, what do you think? We can do it in 5 minutes? 10 minutes? We'll take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back. Read the two documents, and I think the Foster document is incorporated. I think before we go forward, why don't we make a motion to accept the Clink record letter into the record? Right. You so move. I have a second. Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Done. Okay. That accomplished. We're in public comment, and I have one speaker slip from Miss Patricia Clink.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Am I on?
You are.
Yes. First of all, I want to say I really appreciate all the difficulties of our new neighbor in going through this process. It's both intellectually and emotionally very trying when you have a property and you're trying to do the best thing you can with it. So, having said that, I would like to make one other point before I make specific comments on their proposed building project. You know, when we sold the property to Lauren Booth, we were very happy to do so. And we provided for a view easement consisting of a maximum 4-foot hedge with a lined wire fence in it beyond the view easement, so that we would still have views from our front rooms across their property to the ocean. Honestly, it never occurred to us to include anything else in the in covenanted restrictions, because we had spent approximately 4 years working on getting approval for the house that we had proposed at the back of the lot. Not only were there questions about whether the lot was developable, but specifically there was a lot of discussion about massing on the front versus massing on the back vis-a-vis the Coastal Act and possible views from the highway. And so what I did, most of the letter that I wrote consists of comments from the members of the Montecito Planning Commission at the time, and also the MBR, which is what guided us to do what we did and come up with the proposal we did. It never occurred to us that a new buyer of the property would even think of locating a house on the front part of the lot. Honestly, we were totally blindsided. Maybe I can explain why. In my notes that I gave to you, I just want to touch briefly on a couple points. I'm not a land use person, by the way, so that if I misstate something, please forgive me. First of all, we started in 2002 and 2003 to make sure that the lot was developable. And we, in the end, in 2004, ended up with the Montecito Planning Commission looking at the lot and having a discussion. And I went back to the minutes of that meeting, and the commissioners were concerned about, well, if a house is built there, which we've said it could be, at that point they said, but we don't know what house, we're worried about the view corridor. We're worried about size, bulk, and scale. We're worried about it if you locate too close to the lane, because maybe if there were no trees, you could see this massing of a house. And we're also worried about it vis-a-vis the Coastal Act, because we don't want a lot of bulk and scale on the ocean front. There's already plenty there. Indeed, they were concerned about the historic fabric of the neighborhood, which is, if you drive through that gate, it gets pretty bucolic back there, which is nice. They did state very clearly that if they deemed that the existing lot was developable, they wanted to see a lot line adjustment to place the new house as close to the back highway side of the lot as possible. So, at that point, we then embarked on a 2-year process to do a lot line adjustment by the lot. I don't know if you could see it from the diagrams, but it's somewhat fan-shaped. It's wider at the ocean front than it is at the lane. And indeed, we reduced, thank you, we reduced the size of the widest part at the oceanfront, and we added to it at the back of the lane because obviously the commission was very clear at that time about wanting us to build on the rear of the property. So one of the things that our new neighbor has been up against is the fact that she's dealing with a lot that actually got changed in such a way to advantage building in the back instead of in the front. So that's one of the problems with having proper setbacks, which, you know, we understand. So here we are now. In 2006, the Montecito, the MBR as well as the MPC approved the plans to build the house. The Board of Supervisors approved it. They said that their main concern was size, bulk, and scale of the project. So what we were told by Alice Daly in that last meeting, and I just looked at the video of it the other day, was that in Montecito they had somehow during this period of years arrived at a, quote, standard setback of 9 feet that they wanted, if they could, to apply to building projects. And so indeed, what we did do in our project is provide a 9-foot setback at the insistence of the prior owner of 1801, which Lauren Booth now owns. And so that's how we ended up back on the lot, you know, as per direction. At this point, the problem that we continue to have is that we still don't have a 9-foot setback between 1787 and the new proposed house. We're still concerned about that. Maybe that 9-foot setback, side yard setback has been dropped, but I don't think so. We have ocean view problems. The houses are both directed in a southeasterly way, so that what happens is that the sun comes up and we have light. The two houses are separated now, according to the plan, by somewhere between a 12 and a 14-foot space. The new projected house, as you can see from the side view from our property of the house, is a sheer wall, and they've made lots of efforts to soften it with landscaping. But the bottom line is that the softening doesn't help the view. The views from the rear of our house on the bottom story as well as the top back stories of the ocean are no longer possible with this plan. Similarly, when the sun comes over the house at noon, moving toward the northerly direction, it's always shady on this side of the house facing the booths, but now it's literally dark. In the lower floor where there are bedrooms, etc., and on the upper back floor, because the sheer wall of the house next door is only 12 to 14 feet away. Those are the issues that we have, and that is why we continue to ask the commission to please look again at what was said before. Perhaps another lot line adjustment would be in order to reshape the lot so that there's more room on the front, so that the house could be moved further over toward Ms. Booth's other property. But right now, where we're sitting is much of our ocean views in the house, as you move back along the house, are taken away. The only really clear ones that we have now are from the windows actually facing the ocean. So that's my presentation. As I say, I'm not a land use expert, and I apologize for fumbling around a bit, but this is where we've been, and this is where we are now, which is why we continue to be very concerned about the proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions from the commission? Hold on just a second. I don't see any. I have no other speaker slips.
That's accurate.
And we're empty. So I'm going to close public comment, and we'll come back to the applicant for your... Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Idelson. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Actually, my question, I don't have a question for Mrs. Klink right now, but I do have a question relative to that tree that's on the Klink property. I think someone here might be able to help me answer that.
Chairman, overall, members of the commission, I'm Christopher Jacobs. I am Mrs. Booth's land use attorney in this matter. And I have been involved with the property since the acquisition, so I can give you a little bit of the background. Can you hear me okay?
Are you, Chris, Mr. Jacobs, are you addressing Mr. Idelson's question specifically?
Yes,
okay.
I'm addressing the question specifically. It is in fact a reciprocal easement, so it works both ways. It's a view plane corridor easement. It also has a few covenants mixed in. In terms of the easement over the Klink's property, it has 4 cypress trees that were shown as being exception trees to the easement view plane, which are actually included in the recorded document that was recorded in conjunction with the sale. The easement itself was a thoroughly negotiated document. At the time, the Klinks were represented by both bankruptcy counsel and real estate counsel. The easement and the sale itself were both approved by the bankruptcy court, so there's no question that had the Klinks wanted to impose additional restrictions on the parcel, they could have done so. They could have put a building envelope on it, but clearly one of the issues with doing that, and this was an issue for the creditors in the bankruptcy case at the time, was they don't want to diminish the value of the property to the extent that the creditors are receiving less than the sum that they deem to be to fair in the bankruptcy context. So that's a little bit of the background of the easement itself.
Mr. Idelson, did that answer your question?
Well, yeah, let's get back to the tree there. Now, tell me this, from the viewpoint, I guess you wouldn't be the expert on this, but I need to know, how many trees are there in there that are on the ocean side?
There are 4 cypress trees that are shown on the easement document, and I have the easement document here if you would like to see it. I could share that with you.
So you're saying in the transfer of property that was mentioned, that was somehow in the deed easement? In the
view plane corridor easement, which is reciprocal, it works both ways.
Mm-hmm.
So the Klinks have an ability to have views across the front of the Booth property, and Booth has the ability to have views across the front of the Klink property. However, the corridor on the Klink property has within it 4 cypress trees that were recognized in the document as remaining. So those trees are not going anywhere.
Okay.
They're supposed to be maintained in a light and airy manner so that theoretically you can get glimpses of the ocean through the tree branches.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, I believe, Mr. Newman, you wanted to have the floor?
Yes, Chairman. Overall, and Commissioners, my name's Andy Newman, one of the architects of the project. This has been a very exasperating process. I think Mrs. Klink said honestly, and I'm seriously questioning that, she continues to misrepresent the previous project as that the Planning Commission and the BAR forced her to build back on the property. I wasn't involved in that, but I can speculate that to the extent they're not wanting us to build in the front of the property, when they had the opportunity to design their own house, they decided to build it in the back. The problems they had was by building it in the back, they had built it up against the neighbor, and so it was kind of a long process due to their proposal, not due to what the Planning Commission requested. Can I see the slide of our proposal that just shows the site plan and the. In the letter that Mrs. Booth presented, she keeps talking about this 9-foot setback.
You mean Mrs. Klink?
We did it again.
Okay.
Mrs. Klink. Again, I want to emphasize our setback average is in fact 9 foot 10 1/4 inches along her property line, and it's only required to be 5 feet. She mentioned the one thing that I'm not sure. Oh, here we go. Our office, for better or for worse, we've done a lot of beach houses. I would speculate we've worked on over 80 projects. This is the only time that we've done, and in Santa Barbara County, that the string line is not the governing factor, the string line here. And if you look at all the development in this area, all the houses are built right up to the string line, 2 stories. But somehow there seems to be a double standard applied to us here. And our client, Mrs. Booth, has been incredibly gracious and keeps backing up and accommodating the Klinks. But what really annoys me after doing all this, I'm reading this letter from her, and it says, the views of the ocean from the southeastern second-story windows in 2 bedrooms and baths and the master dressing room are blocked. The new proposed structure blocks the views of the ocean. Clearly, that's not the case. This is our second story right here. I'm shaking a little bit. It only overlaps the Klink's house 18 feet. From here on, they're totally looking over our living room, which is 13 foot 4 inches, not 25 feet, and our overall height is 23 feet, not 25. So none of these views are obstructed. Our height of our parapet is approximately the height of their windowsill. When we get to the final drawings and we work with the engineers, we're going to lower that parapet even more if we can to be more accommodating. And the only obstruction is this fireplace, which we've reduced to only 3 foot wide, and it only sticks up 2 feet higher. And I would argue that even in this back bedroom, which has previously been pointed out where you have a mountain view, you still get an ocean view because you have a diagonal view. So it's just not true what she stated. Similarly, when she talks about the daylight, this living room portion, as I mentioned, is 13 feet 4 inches high. So you can imagine once the sun gets in the sky at all, it's going to go right over that. And again, since we're only overlapping this, the sun will be coming in a sort of southeast manner. So pretty much all of that will have very little impact from our structure. So anyway, I think our client, again, has been amazingly accommodating to the Klinks, and it's been very frustrating that everything we do doesn't seem to be good enough to satisfy them. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions or comments to direct at Mr. Newman? Okay, then I'm going to close that part and bring it back to the commission for deliberation. And Mr. Idelson.
Okay, in my visit to the site, I recall clearly that the Klinks had a great ocean view out the front of the house, part that faces the ocean. And then when I walked in those other rooms, the bedrooms, the kitchen, areas like that, I could see losing a view from the side. It was a significant loss. But then again, I look at the applicant for the building, and certainly they want to maximize their view, and they want to get the best use of the lot. And so I think they probably have already reached a compromise as far as the construction and the engineering. So I see there's certainly going to be a loss at the Klinks level. There's no question in my mind that they lose some view. But that's what happens when you sell a lot next to your house, I think. Anyway, that's my feeling. I kind of wish we weren't leaning on people, make it a people thing. I'd like to have it become a land use thing and a development thing, and not be referring to people being uncooperative or something like that, or trying to please them. I really would like to get out of that business.
Okay. Any other comments?
This is kind of a generic comment. I think from the community's point of view, and certainly from a planning commissioner's point of view, representing the wishes of the community, I think this whole area, see, we're going to have to deal with another project coming down, but I think that, this whole area, of Fernald Point, unfortunately has been, incrementally impacted by the overbuilding of most houses, and I think this particular project, there's just so much history. I was sat here when the Clinks came in and did the lot line adjustment. So there's just a history there. And I think just from a community point of view, is like it would be incumbent upon this planning commission to really have a look and see, like, what are we really doing as a whole area? From what I see in photographs that have been presented by Ms. Foster's office and by the Clinks and everybody, it's like, when you talk about setbacks, this literally is going to be another Miramar Beach. There is no open space as we continue to build between setback and setback. We're putting up large structures that have 10 feet essentially between them to them, 5 on one side, 5 on the other side. And from a personal point of view, I think that we really need to look at all of this area in some way from a community's point of view, not trying to put anything on this project. I personally think this project is really a good project, given the amount of the size of the lot, and that lot was created by certificates of compliance, which we all know becomes a little bit of a problem for the county and for us and from the community. And so that's just my comment. I think we've got an unfortunate situation that we continue to magnify these small lots, big houses, setback to setback.
Thank you. Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you. I join my colleagues who say that this is a good project. I think it's unfortunate for Mrs. Klink that she didn't anticipate that there might be a different placement and a different style of house than you had in mind. And I understand that we can't see all of the unforeseeable circumstances, but I do think this is a good project. If my memory serves, when I viewed the property, there was a loss of view from the back bedroom, and I think that is unfortunate. But considering that this project is in compliance, and that MBAR was positive in the comments, and it is a good project, a beautiful project, and I might have chosen a different architecture, but I respect your right to do that. So I will be supportive of this project.
Okay. I'll just make a brief comment. I think, as I understand the process as it was described, I think we have a kind of a model of a good neighbor policy in attempting to meet the concerns of a neighbor. Personally, I have reservations about granting the setback modification. I don't like to see that, but I guess if Ms. Booth can live with that, then the commission ought to live with it. But I think it makes it difficult down the road somewhere for future buyers, assuming that there are some. But having stated that personal reservation, I support the project, and I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the project, and adoption of the staff recommendations.
I have a second. I have a motion and a second. Rachel?
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify that the motion includes the memo that, the revisions that were in the memo dated
Yes.
July 25th.
Yes. Okay, I have a motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Are we ready to go on to? Thank you.
Entire team, they've served you well.
Okay, Mr. Villalobos, would you like to read item number 4 into the record?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Steve Fort, agent for Ron Morrow, owner, to consider case number 10CDH34, application filed on December 23rd, 2010, and to determine that the project is exempt pursuant to sections 15301L1 and 4, 15303A and E, 15304B, and 15061B3 of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
You seem to have we seem to have drawn your card this morning. Mr. Ritterbeck?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the Commission. Yes, my name is Jay Ritterbeck, and I'm the planner for the Morrow project. Again, before we begin, I circulated a memo for this project that also added a few findings for approval. You should have received that on Monday.
Would you like, Ms. Van Mullen, would you like us to include that at this point? Since you're going to ask when we make whatever motion we make, it's included. We did receive it.
Yes, Mr.
Before
Chair.
you go forward, I've neglected to get site visits and ex parte information from the Commission. Ms. Gottsanker?
No ex parte, and I did do a site visit, I believe it was the end of April or beginning of May.
Ms. Burrows? Mr. Idelson? You want to flip on your...
Ex parte from, I believe it was Steve. We talked. I did not visit the site this week.
Okay.
And I had a call from Steve as well.
I think we all received phone calls. For the record, we all received phone calls from the agent for the applicant. I did visit the site when the story poles were up. In my conversation with Mr. Fort, I asked some specific questions, and he indicated he would address them before the Commission this morning. So, Mr. Ritterbeck, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This project is also located in southeastern Montecito, south of the 101, and near the western entry of Fernald Point. The project site is composed of 2 separate adjacent parcels, 0.46 acres and 0.93 acres in size, zoned 1E1 single-family urban residential, and within the California Coastal Commission's appeals jurisdiction. Next series of slides, I'll walk you through the proposed project plans. The 2 lots currently have existing single-family dwellings. The lower eastern lot also has 2 small sheds, an existing guest house, garage, and trellis, a pool, and an entry gate. Views of this development as it exists from the ocean, these 2 adjacent lots, and from the north. Next, we'll look at the proposed development. The applicant proposes a lot merger, demoing both existing dwellings, removing both sheds, construction of 1 new 2-story dwelling that is 8,394 square feet in size. a new 711 square foot detached 3-car garage, a new second story above that, which would be a guest house, 746 square feet in size, a demo and rebuild of the pool, and a demo rebuild of the entry gate. Also proposed is a change in the roof pitch of the existing guest house and conversion of that guest house into a cabana. Views of the proposed elevations from the ocean. Again, here showing the change in the roof. Elevations from the north. From the west. And from the east. The single-family dwelling also has an attached 2-car garage proposed. This project is exempt from secret review pursuant to 15301, 303, 304, and 15061. As conditioned, the proposed project is consistent with the county comprehensive plan, including the Montecito Community Plan and the Coastal Land Use Plan, as well as the Montecito Land Use Development Code zoning requirements. The project has also received support from the Montecito Board of Architectural Review. Upon review, P&D staff recommends that the Commission make the required findings for approval as amended per the memo. Determine the project exempt from CEQA, and approve the project for the coastal development permit subject to the conditions of approval attached within attachment B. And this concludes staff's presentation.
Any questions for staff at this juncture? Mr. Ritterback, I'd like to see 2 slides again. I don't have any specific question. I just want to look at them for a second. One was the aerial view of the neighborhood taken from, looked like out over the ocean. Maybe you're you don't have a picture that goes any further east, do you?
No, I do not, Mr. Chair.
And then the other was the site plan itself, showing the overlay of the, well, I don't know what it showed, it was just the whole proposed plan, I think. That's it. Commissioner Gostenker.
Can we ask questions at this point?
Certainly.
Okay. So on this site plan, which is like very great, what I'm given the plans that we received, and we keep talking about these Fernald Points generically, all these properties, where does this quote unquote string line occur? Because I didn't see that on the plans. I saw what was planned was the hazard mitigation, something or other and something other, but no indication of the plans that were submitted as to where exactly the string line that we keep using both in Miramar area and Fernald Point area.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gottstanker, the string line policy is applicable to oceanfront development that is on a lot with a change in elevation of 10 feet. So it would be a bluff top development. This proposed project doesn't meet that requirement of 10 feet change of elevation from the beach area. Therefore, the string line policy is not applicable.
In the previous case that we looked at,
was 10 feet
was
of
that
elevation.
a 10-foot rise?
Mr. Chair, yes, that would be, I believe it was over 20 feet in elevation change on that project.
Mr. Ritterbeck or Ms. Black, if you know, why the applicability of the string line, which I would interpret to relate to views, what's the history on it? And why would it apply one place and not the other?
Mr. Chair and commissioners, the policy derives from the local coastal plan, from the coastal land use plan. And it's specific as to its applicability. I don't know why it only applies on coastal bluffs. I honestly don't have that history. But that's how it's written. On this particular property, I don't believe that they're encroaching any further toward the ocean than the existing residences do.
That's true.
So even if they're actually a little bit further back. So even if you were to draw a string line based upon their development now, they would obviously be within or outside of that area.
Let's go back to the aerial view for just a second.
Yeah.
Right.
Just to clarify, I'm talking about the existing development on these lots, not the
Right.
development on adjacent lots.
Understood. Understood. Okay. Thank you. You were finished with your presentation, and you have any further questions?
No, I don't have
Okay.
any further questions.
The applicant, Mr. Fort?
Can I advance the slides with this thing too, or do I need a clicker? Oh, okay. Thank you. Do the wheel? Okay. All right. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Overall, members of the Commission. Thank you for your time. My name is Steve Fort. I'm with Suzanne Elledge Planning and Permitting, representing the Morrow single-family dwelling. The Morrows are here today with me, Ron and Susan, as well as Mark Appleton from Appleton and Associates. Try and go two-handed here. Whoops. The existing site plan, I'm going to try to go through and hit some of the questions that Mr. Overall came up with, and might skip over a few things that Mr. Ritterbeck hit on. The proposed site plan, as it was shown in Mr. Ritterbeck's slide, here the red crossing area indicates the existing residences to be demoed. The black line is the outline of the proposed residence. Again, note the increased setback from the beach and the increased side yard setbacks. There's some green hatching that you'll see there with a green dotted line. That represents an additional 5 feet. The structure was pushed back from the ocean after review of the story poles and consultation with the neighbors, the Finnefrocks. They brought the structure back an additional 5 feet to be cooperative and try and help to improve the impact on their private view. I did want to note, as we push back the structures, note that the guest house is now up against a red line, which represents the creek floodway, which I labeled. We don't want to propose structures in the creek floodway. When you get into that, you have to prove that any structures wouldn't cause a rise in the flow if there was a flood. And that can get into costly analysis, and we just want to avoid getting into that undesirable situation of trying to design something there. So the floodway somewhat limits the amount the structure can squeeze back from the beach and maintain the desired program of the Morrows. Maintain the fire turnaround, which comes off the driveway, and there's a turnaround design for this area here, but between the house, the main house, and the guest house. And if we started squeezing the project back, the fear is that we want to maintain the program, the Morrows desire, but the structure might become more of a square box with less articulation, more of a big square mass, probably more two-story elements, and again, smaller setbacks, not what the MBAR and the design guidelines look upon favorably. In terms of grading, the cut involves grading, cut for the foundations, grading for drainage, grading for the guest house, and grading for the pool. The fill number involves getting the finished floor of the house above the flood level, the floodplain level, as is required in the 100-year floodplain, and also to get the courtyards up to match the finished floor elevation for the house. There is an existing seawall on both parcels. An existing approved, permitted set of stairs in front of the parcel to the bottom of the screen there. Parking, there are 6 spaces proposed. There's 2 spaces in a garage in this area, 3 spaces proposed in here, and then there's an existing garage back here. So that'll serve their needs for their children, and they have a classic historic car that they want to park there as well. The south elevation, just touch on some of the positive comments we got from MBAR. They appreciated the articulation, which you can kind of see with some of the shading. This part here is dropped back a little bit. There's some articulation over here. They also like the use of the loggia / patio here that I just pointed out. Story poles, sounded like some of you didn't get to see the story poles. Story poles from the beach. There's the seawall I was talking about. You can see the the fact that they're pulling back from the beach. They're pulling back on the setbacks here on the left and on the right. The public view of mountains from the beach is not impacted. You can't see the mountains to start with, so they're really not impacting that public view. Got some more pictures of the story poles. This is from the neighbor to, we'll call it the west or north, up the coast from their front yard, and you can see one of the rooftop eaves. I tried to point it out here with the arrow. This is from the neighbors. They have a gym up in this area. I'm shaking like Mr. Newman was. They have a gym up in this area, and this is, we went over there. They were nice enough to let us come over and review the story poles. You can see there's an eave right here with the extent of the second floor, and they do have a nice sweeping view, I should say, that goes all the way over to the city. Upon review of the location of the story pole, worked together with the architect and the neighbors, and actually this is proposed to be moved, well, it is on current plans, moved back an additional 5 feet. So that component right there probably would fall somewhere behind that window divider there. Got another picture of the story poles. This is, again, in front of on the beach, in front of the neighbor to the west. And you can see the story poles integrated quite well back into the trees, set back from the beach. You kind of get the context of the structure there. Whoops. As far as recommended square footage, we did review that with MBAR and the Land Use Committee. MBAR, they were positive about the project, fair, reasonable. They acknowledge that it's a lot of house, but there are other large houses on Fernald Point Lane as well. A comment from Tom Belay at the Montecito Association Land Use Committee. His comment, in so many words, was this is not the place to make a poster child or an example of strict enforcement of the square footage requirements. But that said, we did survey 25 properties on Fernald Point Lane, and this is the results of our finding here. 76% of the properties surveyed exceeded recommended square footage. The properties that do exceed the recommended square footage exceed by an average of 42%. We took a sample of 4 lots that range between 1.3 and 1.8 acres, roughly the same of what the 2 merged lots would equal that we're proposing to merge, which would be 1.39 acres. Those average 63% over. The proposed project, again on the 1.39 acre lot, is proposed at 69% over. An important statistic I want to point out is the 2 existing residences are 8,500 square feet. The proposed residence is a little less than that, 8,400 square feet. The voluntary merger is eliminating a substandard lot. The structures, the house is proposed in essentially the same place as the massing exists on the lots today. The existing screening at the back of the lot and along the sides is going to remain. The ocean and side yard setbacks are increased, and the project is compatible with the neighboring properties as we've discussed. Again, we had positive comments from MBAR. We've worked with the neighbors to work on view preservation, and we're going to do some utility undergrounding to benefit both parties. And again, the Land Use Committee really had no comment and found the square footage acceptable. That's it for my comments. I'm available for questions, and I just would ask that you make the findings for the coastal development permit and the CEQA exception. I did want to point out too, I think that the conditions of approval that staff has come up with, fairly standard conditions of approval, and I think that shows that there aren't any significant issues involved with the project, and we've got a fairly standard set of conditions of approval to deal with here. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Fort from the, Mr. Idelson?
Yes, I have a question. You addressed the overages on the square footage of the parcel sizes, but I didn't hear you say what the average size dwelling was in the area, in the neighborhood.
The average
Do you have
size?
that figure?
I think
Mr. Fort, while you're looking at that, let me add something else. Since we don't know the homes that you looked at, that you used in your analysis, if you have something that lists those, it would be helpful if we could, yeah, but I can't begin to read
Okay.
it from here. It would be helpful to have that and allow us to look at
You
it.
want a handout?
If you've got it, it would be great. That doesn't necessarily answer Mr. Idelson's question.
You know,
but
it may be a question that could be answered by staff. I have no, not so, okay.
I believe you asked what the average square footage was.
That's correct, yes.
I have what the average percent over the design guideline is for all the homes, and that is percent over 27%
Yeah.
for all houses.
Okay, that.
But I don't
Yeah,
have the average square
No, I've got those
footage.
figures from you, and I understand that. I just wanted to see the size and bulk relative to the neighborhood, relative to the houses on either side, relative to the other 20, 30, whatever number of houses
Okay,
you want
well,
to use.
I can give you the property to the west is 40% over the design guideline.
No, that's not what I want. I want the square footage of
Oh.
the structure
Okay.
compared to other square footage of structures.
The property to the west, the square footage, according to planning and building development records, 6,232 square feet. The property to the east, which is a 2.5 acre lot, 7,690 square feet. Those are directly adjacent
Okay.
on each side of these two lots.
Thank you.
And Steve, what did you say your square footage was, 8 something or other combined?
For the two existing houses,
No, your total for you.
for a proposed structure,
Yeah.
8,300,
8.3, something or other?
yeah,
Okay, thanks.
8394.
8.39. They're big ones.
Okay, do we?
Which is,
do
again,
we-
less than what's there now.
Do we have any additional questions for Mr. Fort right at the moment? Okay. Do you have any further presentation on your side?
No.
Okay.
Unless,
Um,
we're here to answer any questions you
Yeah,
have, so.
Ms. Gunstanger?
I just have a question for staff. Okay?
Ask away.
Okay, okay, great. Can somebody clarify from a land planning point of view or planning and development's point
Claire,
of view?
is your mic on?
Oh, maybe I'm not. Is that better? Okay, great. The line that we have on the plans, and this just might be something that I used to know and I don't know now, but coastal hazard boundary, and then FEMA 1,000-year flood boundary. How does that impact the process, the plan? I mean, do we look at that? What do we do with those things?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gottstanker, there are two, on this particular lot, there are two different flood control district concerns where they evaluate. The first one is a flood hazard overlay, which, as Mr. Fort had indicated, if there's construction that's proposed within that, and that would be the northernmost section of this lot, they would have to demonstrate that any structure does not increase the net flow of any flood, that it's not increasing the flood elevation. If it would, they would need to compensate for that encroachment into that area. Second would be actually the entire lot, but specifically applicable on the southern side, is a FEMA standard. Essentially, it's an inundation zone. So there's various zones, AE, AO, that have various finished floor height requirements in case of a flood of some sort, or increase in the ocean, the average height of the ocean. So that finished floor height on many of these projects, when it's a demo rebuild especially, would have to have plans that satisfy that height requirement of the minimum floor height, which this project has been designed to conform with, and they've coordinated with Flood Control District to design the project accordingly. So it doesn't have in this zone that requirement that they compensate. So it's two separate.
Yeah, no, I get
okay.
that. So then, Mr. Steve over there, when this new house was designed, was the finished floor for the new project raised to accommodate any of these things?
They've taken that into account of the design of the new house, yes. And we have a letter from Flood Control.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
dictates-
That's
lays
a
out the rules
generic,
for
that's
them.
now just a question for me. I'm just kind of like looking at the plans, want to know that, okay, how the finished floor of the existing projects were X, and so this was raised up to account for all these flood and FEMA things
Yes.
accurately?
Yep.
How much, Mr. Appleton, how much was that raised up?
Can you?
You'd have to
can you
be
come to
on the
mic?
microphone. Hi,
Thank you.
thanks.
I believe it was raised between 1.5 to 2 feet.
Thank you.
Yeah. I might point out, it's a little bit difficult. We've been, see if I can get this to work. Is this the pointer? Yeah. Okay. There are a couple of other factors that enter in, and I think it was hard to read in the site plan, but I just thought it might be worth our while going through it quickly. Number one, the stream runs right through here. The creek bed runs right through here, which as a consequence, notwithstanding the fact that this is a flag lot and has a connection to Fresnel Point Lane out here, there's an easement for this driveway because it can't cross the creek there. So the driveway to this lot comes in now here this way. This condition, as well as the designation of this flood zone, prevents us from really building in this area here. So it's kind of pushed our new construction into this area here. This is the FEMA storm line, and that line determines anything seaward of that determines a specific floor elevation that we have to conform with. We've conformed with that not only in this section here, but actually in the back section as well. Okay. You'll also notice, and I just wanted to go back to the setback questions and the implications of the existing to new and the changes there, that you can see on the existing here that this is the standard kind of 5-foot yard setback that you all were talking about before in the previous project, and those pertain to this here. If we could go back to the site plan that shows the new proposed, there we go here. So you can see those setbacks here by virtue of combining these lots and building one house. We've really significantly increased those setbacks to the two side yards here. So the pale yellow is the existing, the darker colors here are the proposed, and we are not only observing the 10-foot required setback, but we're in excess of that on both sides here. So one benefit we see to combining the two lots is to increase the total side yard setback here significantly. You'll also notice that this is the front line of the existing houses, and we have pulled back, particularly in this case, quite significantly. I'm not quite sure, Steve, what that distance is. Is it around 24 feet? So we're pulling back from what would be an existing oceanfront line here quite significantly here, as well as on this side here. And I wasn't sure if that was clear to you all. But our other problems here, and this doesn't show the garage, there it is, are that we need to retain we can't build northward of this line here because of the storm drainage line. So we're kind of restricted to this zone here. We're using this existing driveway access into here. We're coming into a courtyard area where the fire department has a certain turnaround requirement, and we have, in deference to the Finifrox, redesigned this and pushed everything back 5 feet, including this building by changing the floor plan of this to allow 4 feet, an additional 5-foot pullback on everything with respect to their views. But we're kind of between a rock and a hard place at the moment, between this line, the fact that we're on it, the fire department regulations here, and the nature of the house. And if I could go back just in closing to the elevation.
Mr. Appleton, before you go there,
Yeah.
I think you've covered this, and I wasn't paying as close attention as I needed to. You indicated, starting roughly at the pool, that you can't build anything.
That line there is the flood line.
Explain to me why you can't build anything.
Ken or Steve, can you, if I could give you the particular bureaucratic language appropriately, I would continue speaking, but I'm going to defer to Steve and Ken. Yeah.
In that area back there, the floodway, you need to demonstrate that any structure you propose in there would not cause any rise in the flood elevation were the creek to flood. So it would require buildings to be up on piers of some sort, I imagine, up above the flood level. And you wouldn't be able to build at the ground level because your structure would cause a rise in that flood level. And it would require a special design and a lot of analysis to convince flood control to let you build a structure in there.
Okay, so it's not an absolute prohibition. It's a preference not to because of expense and other potential problems associated.
I think it would be troublesome, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Jay, I don't know if we could go to the rendered elevation that is the southern elevation. This one, yeah, I think it's either the beginning or end of Steve's there. One of the other concerns that we've had, and we've addressed this because it was also a concern of the Montecito Board of Architectural Review, was that in combining two separate houses into one house, they were desirous that we not, as were we and as were our clients, that we not create a house that was a blocky, massive house, that we somehow retained the idea of a kind of variegated massing where the house wasn't pushed into one big rectangle. And we've done that here by virtue of the fact that this side of the house and that side of the house are really separated by an indentation here that's quite significant, pushing back. So the massing here is an attempt to respect the two separate massings of theoretically two separate houses. And I think this was received very favorably by the Board of Architectural Review when we came back a second time and had kind of accentuated that massing. Again, I suppose if one wanted a blockier, massier, single massive house, we would have a little more latitude to play with things like the setbacks and the flood zone lines. But again, the attempt here was to break the massing down into a scale that seemed much more compatible with the neighborhood and with the idea that although we were combining two lots, we were still respecting the scale of the house accordingly and not going to a larger house in appearance. Don't know if you have any other questions, but obviously we're available. But I hope that gives you a little clearer insight into our reasoning.
Let's see, where was I in this process? Have we had public comment? Okay. I'll open it to public comment. I do have somebody raise their hand.
Do you want the...
Please.
I'm Gary Finney-Frock. I've been brought up at the meeting. I'm probably the person most affected by the development. Lived at the Santa Barbara side of the Moros. From day one, they've brought us into the process as far as designing the house and the impact it would have on us, and I do appreciate all the work that they, we've coordinated on this thing. I love the architecture on the thing. I very much like the idea of the lot merger for the reasons that it provides for the increase in side yard setbacks. On our side, it ranges anywhere from 14 to 20 feet versus, I think, 10 feet you said is the standard. So that was very important to us. The one area that we continued to talk to them about was the positioning of the house on the lot. In other words, how far back can you push it towards the creek? When I built my house, I pushed it back. Everybody pushes it back. They came by the house, they looked, you saw the photographs. There is some impact. I understand that. I appreciate the 5 feet. Mark says that's all they got to give, then that's the answer. I can live with that. So if I were voting, I would vote for approval for this project. I do like it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have no speaker slips. I see no one else indicating that they wish to talk, so I'm going to close public comment. I'm going to bring it back to the commission first for any questions and then for deliberations. Any questions? I don't see any. So actually, I have a question. Would you be kind enough to bring up the aerial view again for me, please? No, of the neighborhood. Can you point out for me on that, or can someone point out for me on that view where 1655 is? Purnell Point? Anybody? Anybody?
It looks like dirt's in the front yard.
I know.
That's my house. Yeah.
That's your house.
Yeah.
Well, would somebody point it out with a? It's just the lot immediately to the west.
The structure. Mm-hmm.
And what is 1661?
That is this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And 1665 is the number we hit.
This one.
Let's see. Hold on a second here. Get my paperwork in order. And 1685 is which one? That's the big.
That's the neighbor next, that's that one. The lawn.
And it includes the lawn and the tennis court and all of that, is that
Yeah.
correct? Okay. And 1695 is off the picture here, out of the picture.
That's a bigger lot. That's a 2-acre lot.
Right. No, I know. Okay. Thank you. So I guess we're in deliberation. Mr. Idelson?
Yeah, I'm real pleased with the fact that we had the side setbacks, that the applicant offered extending those, because otherwise I would have felt like it was massing, where at least the break up there, I think we were coming up with 14 feet, 13 feet, something like that, which I did appreciate. And I really feel comfortable with the project.
Commissioner Burrows?
I will be supporting the project as well, and I would like to commend all of you for having neighbor work with neighbor and working out the issues that you had.
Commissioner Gossager, no comments?
You know, ultimately, I think that the fact that you guys have actually worked this all out together and made it work, you know, is really, you know, and it's always, as from my point of view, is always to the benefit of not only you as the property owner, but the community as a whole, you know, and that's always where I'm always standing and looking from. And I think this, you know, you look at the three projects together, the one with the big lawn, your new project that's coming, and then I forgot your name, Mr. Yeah, is yours finished yet, by the way? Oh, okay, those are old photos, though. Okay, great, okay, good. Well, good, I'm really happy for you. Yeah, I think it's great. I think this is a great kind of grouping of neighbors that are working together, you know, and I hope you all enjoy your beachfront property.
I've just got a comment, and then we'll get to taking an action on it. I think we're always faced with some dilemmas. People pay a lot of money and acquire a piece of property, and at one level, you know, there's this urge to say you can build whatever you want within reason, and the reason is supposedly guided by our architectural guidelines and all of that. And you certainly have exhibited a cooperative approach, and I think Mr. Appleton has done an admirable job given the program statement that you had. I am very concerned about the project and the precedent it sets. I look at the lot immediately to the east, and when that one of these days gets redeveloped, I can see all of that being moved to the front of that property, and I can see a 20,000 square foot home on there. We apparently are not going to apply the string line, so I have no idea what would happen to your views or their views or the people to the east, because we don't have that on exhibit. And I feel like the size, bulk, and scale of what you're asking for, it doesn't feel right to me, and I'm troubled by it. And I don't think we've done a very good job in this area, was what Ms. Gottsteker was saying earlier. When I look at the numbers of the neighborhood compatibility, you know, there are two big parcels on here. One's 79 and one's 88% over, but there are also three properties that are not over at all. So we've got very much of a mixed bag, and I wish you. I'm going to vote to not approve the project, but I think you've got the votes. But I wish you'd go back and reconsider visiting your program statement. I wish it were smaller. Having said that, I think we're through with comments. I will entertain a motion.
I make a motion we approve the project as presented with the staff recommendations.
And I second.
And the memo.
And the memo.
And the memo.
And I second the motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One of us. So congratulations. With that, I think unless we have some other business that I'm unaware of, Commissioner Gottsteker.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask a question now that we've completed with the projects. it's just my inquisitive mind. The fact that all three of the projects that we saw today had staff memos that were put out, 24 hours ago, or what, I mean, very quickly. And so I kind of go, what's going on? What's going on? Why did that happen? So I just didn't know where the source of all of that was, just because I'm curious.
Yes. Mr. Chair and Commissioner Gottstinker, fair question. We actually have some prototype documents that we use for findings and conditions and things, and there were some inaccuracies in in the findings proto, and some things that planners, I think, just missed because of the way it's structured, so we fixed that.
So that's like generically across the board that you're just kind of revamping those documents at direction of county council. Doesn't mean anything.
It's really to reflect what the ordinance actually says, and there were some inaccuracies. in
Right,
the
that's where I
prototype.
was going.
So
Okay,
it's
got
just-
it. That's
it's
what I
just-
figured, and
they
I
were-
just wanted to know for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
One comment, a personal comment in reviewing the reports. It would be very helpful, both in the findings and in the conditioning, when there is something that is not generic to the process, but that is specific and distinct for that particular project. If it is either underlined or made bold, as it was in the revisions that we got, it would greatly speed the process of reviewing them. You'd think after a while I would be used to reviewing some of the standard conditions, and for the most part I do, but when they're specific to a particular site, it's easier to spot them if you can make them bold. I don't know whether that's a reasonable request or not, but
Mr. Chair, I'm just not sure I understand what you're asking, because I look at the memo and what's bolded is the site rules.
I'm not talking about these particular memos.
Okay.
I'm talking about the findings and the conditions. We have standard conditions about washouts and that kind of stuff. It's when you have a condition that is specific to a project rather than generic.
So on the, Mr. Chair, on the conditions, if you look at the conditions, they start out either standard, and then they'll say noise, standard noise, or standard flooding, or whatever. If it's a special condition designed for that project, it'll say special. So that's your cue to look at
non-standard
language.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.